Hello, welcome to part 2 of Coding for Kids in Scratch. Today we'll be going over chapter 6, which is all about variables. So let's get started. First of all, welcome to the advanced section of this book. This part will cover some more advanced topics than the previous sections, but each idea will be broken down slowly with plenty of examples, so there's no need to worry. With that covered, let's get into the first topic, variables. This chapter is all about those round blocks that we have skipped over thus far. Those blocks are what we call variables. If you've learned about variables in math class, they're exactly like that. Essentially, variables are objects that store some information. The variable stores some value so that you can keep track of different values or use those values to do something else. It can be a little confusing, so let's work through some examples. In addition to all of the round blocks we have seen before, Scratch gives you the ability to create variables of your own. To help you understand the concept behind variables, we will first work with a variable that we make together. After we get the hang of that, we'll explain how to use most of the other round blocks. So, go to the home page, create a new project, and then once it opens up, name it variables so that you can always come back to it and see how variables work. Then, go to the variables category, which is the second to last. By default, Scratch has one variable created called myVariable. Clicking that little white box next to the myVariable round block will show the value of myVariable in the stage. Clicking that box again, which is now blue with a white check mark in it, will make the variable disappear once more. So if you right-click the round block while it's in the code storage, you'll see that it brings up two options, rename and delete. Delete will just delete the variable, but when you click rename, it'll bring up a box something like this that lets you type in a new name for the variable. So let's type in something new. So I'm going to call it test. And then you can hit enter or return, or you can just click this blue OK box. And then you'll see that the variable is renamed here. Alright, so now let's work with this variable using some of the provided code blocks. So as always, let's go to the events section, get the when green flag click block and drag it to the code area. Then let's go back to the variables category, and let's start by noticing that there's only 4 blocks that they give us here. So there's actually not much you can do with these variables that you create. So you have the set, you have the change, and then you have the show and hide variable blocks. The show and hide variable blocks are pretty simple. They show or hide the variable in the stage, and they basically do the same thing as this white box that we clicked before, but it lets you do it from your code itself. So let's try to use them. So let's drag the show variable block underneath the when green flag clicked. Then let's go to the control category and grab a wait 1 second block and drag that under the show variable block. Now let's go back to the variables category and drag a hide variable block. So then let's drag this under the wait 1 second block, so now that your code should look something like this. Right? So basically it'll be when green flag clicked, then show variable, then wait 1 second, then hide variable. So as you might expect, the variable is shown for 1 second and then it disappears. So let's try to use the other blocks because these are pretty simple. They show and they hide. Right? So let's try to use the other blocks so we can see what else we can do. So for now, let's delete the wait 1 second and hide variable blocks by clicking the wait 1 second block and dragging both of them to the code storage to delete them. We'll keep the show variable block so that we can see the value of the variable as we change the code and add some more blocks and use these two, the set and change ones. So now drag the set variable to 0 block underneath the show variable block from before. And as you might guess, this block simply just sets the value of the variable to a certain number. So then change the value in this block from 0 to any number of your choosing. For example, I'll change it to 25. And then the code should look like this with the when green flag clicked, then the show variable, then the set variable block. Now run the program. You'll see that the variable appears, and then the value of the variable was changed to whatever number you chose. This block is also just pretty simple. The change block is a little more complicated to understand, but it's also pretty simple. But to show you how it can be used, we'll go to the control category and grab a repeat 10 block and drag it underneath the set variable block. And then we'll go back to the variable section and we're going to grab a change variable by some amount block. So let's set this value to something different, like I'm going to set it to 5. And basically what this block does is that it will add or subtract some number from the value of the block. So depending on if it's positive, it'll add, and then if it's negative, meaning it just has a minus sign in front, it'll subtract from whatever the value of the variable is currently. Now to finish it off, go back to the control category and grab a wait 1 second block. And actually, let's put this in above the change test so that you can see that the variable will set to a certain value, then there's a little bit of a break, and then it starts changing every second. So now that let's run the program, see that it's set to 25 again, and then every second it'll count up by 5 or whatever number you decided to make it change by. So you'll see that these blocks are actually kind of pretty simple, but they can be pretty important and pretty powerful in different projects when you use them properly. So for now, let's go over the last function that we'll be going over in the variables category in this chapter, and that's the make a variable button. So let's just click that, and it'll bring up a box that looks something like this. And this essentially just lets you create a brand new variable for your project. So let's just keep the name simple, variable 1, so that we can focus on how the variable works rather than the name. And then below it, you'll see that there's two options, for all sprites and then for this sprite only. So just to see what it does, let's click where it says for this sprite only. And let's click OK to create the variable. And you'll see that it shows up here in the left section in the code storage, and it also automatically shows up with its value in the stage. But you'll notice that in the stage, it's also preceded by this little section here that says sprite1:, and that essentially just tells you that this variable is only accessible by sprite1. So to check that, let's go underneath the stage where the sprites are all located, and let's click this choose a sprite button, which is a cat with a plus button right next to it in the bottom right. And let's click that, and let's just choose some random sprite. And you'll see that while it still shows up in the stage, you can't actually access the variable from the code storage. And so basically, this feature can be used so that certain variables will be only seen in the code for certain sprites. So that way you can simplify the programming when you get to complicated programs with like 10s and 20s of just variables upon variables. And it helps you simplify and understand what different variables are for and for what sprites they affect. That way you don't have to worry about extraneous variables that don't apply to your current sprite. But on the other hand, variables like test are actually able to be seen by all the sprites, and that allows you to build a connection between the sprites and between their code by using the same variable. So to test that out, let's go to the events category and drag a when green flag clicked block to the code area of this new sprite, and you know it's the new sprite because you'll see its little translucent picture in the top right. Now let's go back to the variable section, and let's drag a change variable by block and drag it underneath the when green flag clicked block. Now change the value here to something that's like super obvious, that you'll notice that it's a big change from when it was before. So I'm going to put it as like 100. So that way we'll be able to clearly see when this code activates. But we don't want it to activate just at the start like the cat variable, because then you won't be able to tell that is it the cat that's changing the variable or is it this new sprite that's changing the variable. So let's go to the control category and grab a wait block and drag it above the change block in between the when green flag clicked and the change block. Then let's change that time value from 1 to 12 seconds. That way you'll know that it's long enough so that basically the cat code will fully execute, it'll count all the way up, and then it'll wait a second or two, and then the code from the second sprite will run, so that way you'll be able to clearly differentiate between the code from the cat and the code from this new sprite. So the code should look something like this with the when green flag clicked, then the wait block, and then the change block, and then press play. And you'll notice that even though we're looking at the code for a different sprite, the code from the cat is still running. So let's just wait for it to go through, and you'll see that it's slowly counting up, and now it's finished counting up, and then it'll wait a little bit, and then it suddenly just jumps up by 100. And that's the code from this second sprite acting. So once the time finishes up, then this code will change the same variable that the cat is able to change, and it's able to add 100 to that value. So both sprites are able to affect the same variable, and this is something that can be used when you're making big projects with a bunch of variables and a bunch of sprites, and it can make it a lot more powerful and give you the access to a lot of cool features. But for now, let's go over the rest of the uses of other round blocks and stuff. So let's delete the second sprite that we made by clicking this little trash can with the X on it at the top right of the sprite box in below the stage. And then that should just bring you automatically back to the code area for the first sprite. Now, just click and drag all of the code from the code area except for the when green flag click block to the code storage to delete it, and so that only the when green flag click block is left in the code area. We don't really need the rest of those since we're going to be working with different code this time. So one of the major uses of the round blocks from the other categories is to be used as a value in other code blocks. So in any of the blocks where we've been typing in numbers as a value for like time or the number of repetitions or something else, you can actually just use the value of a round block instead. So to try this out, go to the control category, and then let's grab a forever loop and drag it underneath the when green flag clicked block. Then let's go to the motion section and grab a go to x0, y0 block and drag that inside of the forever block. Next, let's go to the sensing category, and this is where we're going to get our round blocks. So find the two round blocks, mouse X and mouse Y, which are near this little further down underneath two more pointed blocks, key, space pressed, and mouse down question mark. And then you're going to drag mouse X into the value next to X, waiting for the highlight to appear around the circle, and then you can just let go and the mouse X will automatically appear. So that way the block is go to X, mouse X. And then do the same thing for the mouse Y, dragging it into the value. Once it's highlighted, let go, and then the block will become go to X, mouse X, Y, mouse Y. And then your code should look something like this with the when green flag clicked, then the forever block, and then the go to X, mouse X, Y, mouse Y inside of that. Now let's just run the program, and you'll see that as the cat will just follow along the cursor. Even if the cursor isn't in the stage, it'll get any data it can, and it'll start moving the cat. Any round block can be used like we've just used it in this program here, with the round block taking up a value, and that can add a lot of functionality to any program that you make. So then the other major use of these round blocks is with operators, which is actually its own category here. And basically round blocks can be used in any of the round or pointed operator blocks as long as they have a round hole for the value to go into. So let's go through an example. So to start, let's delete the code from inside the forever block by dragging where it says go to, dragging that block to the code storage to delete it. And then let's go to the control category and drag a wait 1 second inside of the forever block. Then let's go to the motion category and grab a go to random position and drag that underneath the wait 1 second block. Then let's go back to the control category and let's drag an if then block underneath the go to random position block. And then let's go to the looks category and let's drag a say hello for 2 seconds block inside of the if then into that opening there. And then let's change the message to something that says out of bounds, exclamation point, and let's just change the time to let's say 1. And then we're going to go back to the motion category, and we're going to grab this go to X some number, Y some number, drag it underneath the say block from before, and let's set both of these values X and Y to 0. And now we need to get something to go in this if then block. So let's go to the operators category. In this we're going to first grab two of these blocks on the very bottom that say ABS of and then a round hole. So let's grab two of them and let's just drag them into this code area for our own use. Now let's go back to the motion category and scroll all the way down until we find X position and Y position. These are round blocks. So let's just drag them into this code area for our own use. And now we're going to drag each of these into the green blocks of ABS of that we grabbed before. So this part is going to get pretty complicated. So I'll go slowly so that you can follow along. So click this X position block and drag it to the hole in one of the ABS of blocks, making sure that the round hole gets highlighted, and then let go and it should click into place. Then do the same thing for the Y, and then you'll have two blocks that say ABS of X position and ABS of Y position. Basically, these blocks will make sure that the value is always positive, meaning it'll get rid of any minus signs that are there. So then let's go back to the operators category, and we're going to take this first block where it's blank plus blank, and we're going to drag that to the code area. Now in this code area we're going to grab this block here, the ABS of X position, and we're going to drag it into the left hole. So click where it says of, and then slowly drag it until you see that the left hole is highlighted in white. Then just let go. And then do the same thing for the Y. So grab it where it says of, drag it until the right hole this time is highlighted in white, and then let go. So now it should be ABS of X position plus ABS of Y position. Now let's look back at the operator section, and we're going to find the pointed block blank is greater than 50, and we're going to drag that into the pointed hole of the if then block, and then let go. And now before we add this block into there, we're going to change this value from 50 to 200. Now here's the hard part. This hard part is always a little difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag the blocks by clicking on the plus sign, right? Making sure that you're dragging the entire thing, and then slowly drag it into this left green hole in the pointed block that we just put in, making sure that the left hole is highlighted in white. And then once it is, let go, and it should now look like this. That part can always be a little difficult, so make sure that your code looks exactly like mine, and if it doesn't, re-watch the video and then pause when you need to so that you can get each step down. It can be pretty hard at first, but it's good practice for later when you have to assemble more complicated code. And as a general rule, I would keep track of the outermost piece, and then click where you know it is part of that piece to move the entire thing. So then, once your code is correct, let's run the program. So then, the cat should move to some random position, and if it's a certain distance from the center, it'll say out of bounds. So most of the time, you'll see that it's actually saying out of bounds a lot. So, but sometimes you'll get lucky, like I was just then, and it won't actually say out of bounds. That means it's within 200 of the center location. So this program looks complicated, but if you look at it step by step, you'll see that it just adds the value of x and y and just checks if it's larger than 200. If it is, then it'll just move back to the center. That's it. But congratulations, you've just finished your first advanced lesson. Hopefully you have a better idea now of how the round blocks and variables work in Scratch. You may not have mastered them, but that's alright. We will continue to work with variables in programs and projects to follow, and you'll slowly get better at using them the more you practice. But for now, let's move on to the next chapter where we'll be learning to make our very own blocks.